Okay, we are live. Welcome to Credit Versio's Q&A Wednesday, live for March 8th, 2023. Thank you so much for joining me today. It is just going to be us together, so the gloves are off. We can talk about anything that you want. And a little background on me. I'm a certified FICO Pro, been in the business for 10 years. I've done probably about 23,000 credit consultations in all the years I've been in the credit repair space. And a big part of my job is explaining to people how credit works, how credit bureaus work, how the scores work, what the credit repair process is legally and legitly, and also spending some time dismissing and debunking a lot of the myths that are out there. But I'm here for you. I'm here to answer questions. I do usually show up to our lives with a topic that I'm going to go over, but this is our time together, and feel free to ask me any question that you want. And we got Mike. Mike's back. Hey, good to see you. Been a long time. Yeah, please send me some questions. I'm hungry for questions. Last time we had a pretty good turnout. I'm hoping we have a good turnout as well today. And, a little housekeeping. I've got some pretty exciting news. I mean, it is for us anyway for Credit Versio, but really the credit repair space overall. So last month was pretty much the biggest month that Credit Versio has ever had. A little over 12,000 people created a Credit Versio account and linked their 3-bureau credit report. That's a record. And that's an incredibly exciting monumental benchmark for us to reach, because what that probably means, if we hadn't already surpassed all of the big credit repair companies before, which I think we probably had as far as how many people enroll every month, for sure that 12,000 plus people that created a Credit Versio account, raised their hand, decided to fix their own credit. They're not paying anybody to fix their credit. It's all DIY. That 12,000 people, I think, represents the largest movement of people going into the credit repair space, bigger than Lexington Law, bigger than CreditRepair.com, probably bigger than both of them put together. So it's a very, very exciting time. And every day, about 350 to 600 people create a Credit Versio account, link a 3-bureau credit report, and decide to take charge of their credit repair. So very exciting stuff. DIY has become such a huge movement in the credit repair space, and I'm very happy too that there are some large credit repair companies who are licensing our software to run the entire dispute process of their business, because they realize that the DIY software is just as good, if not better than, probably actually better than their dispute processors that are looking at credit reports with their eyes trying to figure out what's going on. Okay, let's see. Mike with a question. Please explain how a dispute can be saying updated when actually nothing changes as before and after on Experian. It should just say remains. Well, the language for updated, Mike, what that means is so there's a term called updating the tape. It's a really, really old term. It might even go back to the 60s, maybe even the 70s. I'm not quite sure. But what that means is it's the act of the data furnishers updating the information to the bureaus, which they, by the way, do every single month. It's just called an update or updating the tape. It doesn't mean that anything has been changed. It doesn't mean that they updated the account to be different. It just means that they updated the data that they do on a monthly basis. So it's a good point. It's a really good point. Like when I got into in fact, going back even before I got into the credit repair space, when I was a credit repair client about 11 years ago, I remember that being one of my questions. When I saw updates coming in, I'm like scouring through my credit reports, trying to figure out what got updated exactly. And some things did and some things changed. But the part that perplexed me is the same thing that's perplexing you, is the updates on the accounts that look to be the exact same. So again, all that means is that the data furnisher updated that file again, regardless of anything changing or not changing. But great question. Okay, so coming today, I want to talk about, this has been a little bit of a hot topic for the last week. And the cool thing is, The guy that handles customer service here, Travis, if you've ever called in, that's the guy that you're going to get a hold of. Great guy, is on vacation. He and his wife are on a cruise right now. So I've had the privilege of being on the phones doing some customer support, which I missed doing when we started at Crediversio, when we were launched about 3 years ago. In fact, Sunday was our 3rd year anniversary launching Crediversio. So man, that happened really, really fast. 3 years really flew by fast. And in that time, we're almost at 250,000 people who created a Crediversio account. So pretty epic. That's a really good movement in the credit repair space to be going DIY. So I had a chance to talk to a lot of people while I was doing customer support on the phone, and also the emails that we get in, and a little bit of Facebook too. So I've really enjoyed it. Focused pretty much all my time this week. So, but it's always the same questions. It's the same, 25, 30 questions or so that I get day in and day out that I've gotten for the last 10 years, but it's new to you, and I'm happy to answer them for you. But one of the things that happens periodically, and I had a bunch of tickets come in and a couple of phone calls. And that is what happens when you get a dispute, or get a response from the bureaus that says, we don't believe the letter was sent by you. So there's a couple of different ways that people take this. I realize that when people get that letter, they kind of freak out a little bit, because they're like, oh my gosh, I used Crediversio to send these dispute letters, or a credit repair company sent the letter on my behalf, or I downloaded some letters from the FTC website or the CFPB website, and I got this response. In fact, let me put it up on the screen. I'll show you what it is. The chances are you haven't gotten this letter. Oh, sorry. I put your comment back up there, Mike. Okay. So this is from TransUnion. Now, it just so happens that TransUnion, I'm hiding my face here, but TransUnion is typically the main culprit behind this. And well, let me take this down real quick. Let me give a little bit of backstory, then we'll get right back to this letter. Okay. TransUnion, in all the years that I've been doing this, over 10 years now, seems like a couple times a year, TransUnion just likes to try to weed out all the disputes that they receive. So TransUnion is the smaller of the 3 bureaus. Doesn't necessarily mean anything significant, but maybe that might mean that their dispute resolution department might be a little bit smaller than, say, Experian. And what we suspect goes on is when they get this onslaught of letters. Now, I'll give you a little factoid that you might find interesting. About 70% of dispute letters that are received by the bureaus are sent by credit repair companies. So, and legally, credit bureaus can ignore letters that come from credit repair companies. That's in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. It's called Exclusion G. It's been there for decades. But they don't always know. But sometimes when letters come in, they come in bulk. There's thousands and thousands of people sending letters that were generated by Crediversio. They don't look at these letters necessarily as letters coming from a credit repair company, but they also at the same time don't know for sure. Nobody's really reading the letter, looking at it going, we think this might have been sent by a credit repair company. In fact, when you sign your letter, at the very bottom, if you've read it, it says, I personally signed and sent this letter. The whole purpose is to let the credit bureaus know that this is not generated by a third party, that you sent this yourself. Regardless, it's going to happen on occasion. Doesn't matter what kind of a letter you send. Occasionally, you're going to get a letter that looks like this. And it says, let me scroll up a little bit. There we go. Let me move this letter. So this is just a little bit of a salutation here. It says, we recently received a request that included your information, but it didn't appear that you or a properly authorized third party sent it to us. Okay. Now, down below here, I'm not sure if you can see. Oh, you can't see my mouse. I'm sorry. I thought you could see my cursor, but I realized that you can't. Okay, so we're about the second or third sentence in the second paragraph. It's the very last sentence, a long one. And it starts off with, if you're working with a third party such as a credit repair company or credit clinic, they have to identify themselves in their communication to us and provide proof that you have authorized them to communicate with us on your behalf. All right, now, it's a stab in the dark. Why do they do this? they're probably trying to get rid of a lot of the credit repair company letters that go in there. And it doesn't mean anything other than they just randomly send these out to see if they can slow down that onslaught of dispute letters that are coming their way. So some people take it two different ways, one of two ways. Some people call up like, hey, what do I do next? And some people are like, oh, these letters don't work because they refuse to take them. It's not what's happening. So we understand this takes place. And that's just part of the process of sending in a dispute letter, is the bureaus are going to try to shake some of this stuff loose. That's what round 2 is for. Really, this is not all that different than getting no response in round 2 at all, and then having to follow up with no response in round 1 at all, and then having to follow up with a round 2 dispute to say, hey, listen, nothing's changed. I asked you to do an investigation. You said that this is all reporting accurately. Can you please tell me how you came to that conclusion? It's your legal right to do that. So I want to walk you through something real quick. Let me put a pause there. I got a couple of questions. Let's see. Abdul says, hi, David. I really like your website, but I think you're lacking one thing. That is your personal information. Actually, that's in there. I don't see any option to dispute the personal information like name and address or date of birth. So Abdul, that's not a dispute. That's just updating what's called the PII section in your credit report. That's the personal identifying information. You're not disputing it. You're just updating it. And yes, it is in Credit Versio. Go into your template section. In fact, let's do a screen share right here. Hold on one second. And I'll explain where it is, Abdul, so you know where it is. Go into your Credit Versio account and go into tutorials, and there's a section called templates. And if you go into templates, scroll all the way down to the very bottom. In fact, let's do a little screen share right here. Here we go. All right, so here we are. Hopefully you can see this. I'm in the tutorial section. There you go. You can see my cursor this time, hopefully. Sorry about the Credit Versio big logo right there, but you can see it right here, tutorials. I'm in the template section right there. Scroll all the way down, and there it. Where is it? Oh, you know what? This is my staging. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is my staging account right here. Oh, hold on one second. Let me get out of this. Okay. So the staging area is a little bit outdated. We don't have all of the letters in there. But Abdul, if you go in there at the very bottom, it says personal information, and that's the letter. It has an instruction page. It has a letter template, and in the instruction page, it'll tell you what ID documents you need to put in there to update your personal information. But great, thanks for bringing that to my attention. Just also too, that's. It's just one of those things where we've got a lot of stuff that's not part of the dispute process that are going to help you both in the coaching section and in the template section. Okay. Yes, you are very welcome. Good. You found it. Excellent. All right, Abdul. And by the way, let me just clarify this real quick. You don't need to do this first. There's a big myth that circulates. It's always circulated in credit repair, at least for the 10 years that I've done it, where a lot of credit repair people believe and also spin this idea that if you can remove old names and addresses, that somehow you can disassociate yourself from some of your debts and it will improve the chances of getting things deleted. Now, that's completely untrue. The bureaus have over 30,000 permutations that link you to your credit reports. Your name and address are just two. There's another 30,000 of them that do that. But it's still a good idea to update your personal information. So you do want to have an accurate name. You do want to have your accurate date of birth and your address, just for the sake of making sure you don't get a mixed file or that there's no issue in pulling up your credit report, which happens from time to time. So we do have people that fail their security questions when they're trying to create a smart credit account because they got a mixed file or there's some data that's missing. Okay. All right, Mike, are the bureaus considered negligent if they are not sending the way they verified? If that's what my dispute language asked them to prove it? No, it's not negligent, Mike. The language in the law is this, that the data furnishers And by the way, it's not the bureaus that are responsible for the investigation. It's the data furnishers themselves. The bureaus are just repositories of data. The data furnishers, your creditor, aka creditors, are the ones that have to do the investigation. And in the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and also in what's called the Credit Reporting Resource Guide. Now that's the Bible. That's from the Consumer Data Industry Association. This is like the trade group for the bureaus and data furnishers. They're the ones that invented Metro 2. They're the ones that kind of dictate what data furnishers have to do, what bureaus have to do, and how they position data. And inside of there, and also in the Fair Credit Reporting Act, it says that the data furnishers have to perform what's called a reasonable investigation. That's literally what it says. So it leaves a lot of room. What does that mean exactly? A reasonable investigation, because what's reasonable for me and for you might not be reasonable for somebody else. But they need to be able to come back and say, we've done a reasonable investigation. That doesn't necessarily mean they got to give you what you asked for, because sometimes people ask for some things that the bureaus and the creditors don't have, and they might appear to be pretty realistic. Like one of the things that people ask for is, I want to see the original contract with my wet signature. Well, there's really nowhere that says they've got to do that. It's not a reasonable expectation that the bureaus have that. It's not a reasonable expectation that your data furnisher has that. So if I signed a contract, let's say I bought a car. We've all bought cars, I'm assuming, and especially if you finance one, press down hard, 3 copies. I mean, there's lots and lots of paperwork. And if you're disputing something on an auto loan, as an example, or a repossession, and I've seen people do this, like, show me my wet signature on the contract. They don't need to have that. That's held with probably with the dealership until they destroy it. So there's no reason for the original creditor to have something. There's other ways that they were able to verify that it's you. Okay, so really, Mike, the only thing you can do is mount a good dispute and keep your fingers crossed that they're not able to verify it. Anything that, like, you can't not bully a creditor into deleting things from your credit report. There aren't any like secret words or magical words that you can write in there that makes them go, oh wow, well, this person said this, so we gotta do a different kind of investigation. It really doesn't work like that. Okay, let's see, Tim. Let's see. I'm in my round 2. I disputed with a collection agency an account. I requested for them to verify with proof of the debt. The response was they will send proof within 60 days. I thought they had 30 days to provide proof. Well, typically, Tim, they should have that already. 60 days is a little bizarre. So when you dispute an account, they have to show a chain of ownership. It could be just a stall tactic. It could be them trying to get a little bit of money out of you. Sometimes they'll do that, but if they don't necessarily have to send it over to you, even though you asked. They have to prove that over to the bureaus. They have to. If you send that kind of a dispute, like I need documentation that this is legit. This is why we want to do bureau disputes, because the bureaus understand that the collection companies have to follow what's called the FDCPA. That's the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and they're very familiar with this stuff. And they know whether or not the third-party collection company has the ability to verify that the information is correct, that they have a legal right to collect. And a lot of times you see collections get deleted, not because the collection company deleted the information, but because the bureau did. It's one of the magical things about disputing directly with the bureaus, because ultimately the bureaus are responsible and culpable for the data that's there. So if there's something that's a little squirrely, they're the ones typically that'll delete it for you. So, or if this collection agency didn't respond. So what I would do is on your round 2, or you're in your round 2, I believe. Let me read it again. Dispute the collection. Okay, yeah. So if you've already sent out your round 2, the round 2 is just disagreeing with what they told you and asking for validation. And again, bureau's going to see that. Bureau's going to record it. If they don't perform, it doesn't matter what they say. If they're going to send it to you in 60 days, the bureaus might delete it for you. Fingers crossed. Okay. Let's see. Mike. If you lost, it took 2 6 month breaks and restarted disputing. But so far, again, the same results with Experian. Mike, you're probably done. Um, the only remember, and you probably remember this, but there's 4 set of circumstances where accounts get deleted from credit reports. Either the information has to be erroneous, outdated, incomplete, unverifiable, and that's really about it. So to the extent that you can dispute on those things, if the data furnisher can come back and say, oh man, everything is right, everything is good, and the bureaus are satisfied within the boundaries that they work within, then the information is going to stay. It affects you less once you get to that 24-month, 36-month mark when you're putting time between you and the derogatory credit. So if it's not coming off, you might be done. Listen, Mike, you ask a lot of great questions. I always enjoy having you on here, and I feel like like I've shared a lot of my personal experience with you when we have these lives. And for me personally, when I went through the credit repair process back in, what was it, 2011? Yeah, I think it was 2011. Right, actually 2012 when I finished up. I would say about 40% of the stuff that I disputed was deleted, which means about 60% of it stayed because it was reporting accurately. It just wouldn't come off. But it began to matter less the older that it got. And as much as we all want to delete that stuff that's that's derogatory, sometimes it's reporting accurately, and there it'll stay for the full 7 years. So I'd give it a couple rounds, Mike. Give it a couple rounds and see if anything happens. But I wouldn't go more than like maybe 3 rounds. If you got 3 rounds into it, Crediversio's not finding any errors, nothing's really moving, then the items are probably going to stay. And you listen, that's not the worst thing in the world that can happen. In fact, if about 40% of the negative items came off my credit report, 60% stayed. I had to rebuild from scratch because there was a time where the only credit I had was bad credit. Even the stuff that I had paid off that was in good standing, it was so old that it just fell off. So it aged off and it hurt my credit even more. So I had to start from scratch. I started off with a $200 Visa card from Chase, I think. No, I'm sorry. It was Open Sky. It was a secured card. Then I got a Chase card with a $500 credit limit was all they would give me. But it took some time. It really took some time. My scores were in the mid 500s when I started. And I think 6 months, 8 months later, they were in the low 7s. And then it took another 2 years to get into the high 7s. And then that's usually where they float now, high 7s, low 8s on a good day. So, and here I am about 11 years later after my repair. But really, my credit was solid in the high 7s after about 2 years or so, 2.5 years after starting my credit repair. And that's just time. That's just distance that I put between me and the things that were hurting my credit. And eventually all that stuff just aged off. And the only thing left was all the good stuff that I've got that I still have on my credit report right now. Okay. Abdul, hey David, can you please talk about this? If you have a charge-off account on your credit, how do they count the timing of the 7 years to delete? Like, do they count it from the charge-off date or the first missed payment date? You got it right, Abdul. Very last sentence, first last payment date. So we refer to that as the DOFD, the date of first default. So the way that works is you got your 30-day late payment right here. Then you got your 60 and your 90 and your 120, and maybe you got a 150. Probably not going to see a 180 on consumer credit cards. Pretty much you see 180s like on auto if they're trying to work with you, or real estate, they're trying to work with you. But usually by about that, between that 120, 150 mark, that's when you're going to see your credit card issuers do a charge off. So where does that 7 year mark begin? It starts with that first 30-day late. That's the date of first default. Now, this is really important. What happens is people get that time confused, because what happens is, especially people start having a little bit of trouble, they start missing some payments, and then they get back on track, then they fall off track, then they get back on track. And eventually what happens is they make that one 30-day late payment that eventually leads to that 60, that 90, and that's that terminal failure right there. So the reason why I bring this up is some people look at their credit reports and are like, oh, I got a 30-day late here, but then they paid on time. And then they paid a little bit late, and then they paid, and there's another 30, and then they paid on time. Well, they think that 30 days started way over here when it didn't. It's that 30-day that is the terminal default, meaning you didn't catch up at all. It's 30, 60, 90, 120, and then maybe 150, or you'll just see the CO in the payment status section, which is collection charge off. So 7 years from that date. Great question, Abdul. Love that question. All right. Thanks for the honest answers. You're very welcome. That's what I'm here for. Listen, nobody ever wants to talk about the fact that they had some challenge credit, but listen, that's what we're here for. We're all adults. Things happen. If you want to know why a company like Credit Versio can have 250,000 people that have created accounts, I think about 70,000 people have gone through the entire process, and we've only got like 300 reviews. Well, why so little when it's such a great software? Nobody wants to talk about it. It's like your bankruptcy. If anybody's ever filed for bankruptcy, it's like you don't want to write a great review about how you had to, get bankruptcy debt relief and hire a bankruptcy attorney. It doesn't matter how great of a job that they did. You don't want to put that out in the interwebs there. So people keep it to themselves. They want to do their repair. They want to keep it quiet, and they want to move on with their life. 100% respect that. So, we do have a handful of, bold people who don't mind leaving reviews. But anyway, that's what I'm here for. I'm an open book, and I've been doing this a long time. I love what I do, and I love talking to people about credit. And the more we can break this stuff down and talk about it, the faster we can get on the right side of credit. And anything that's going to get you into that 700 range and above, that's really what we're talking about. Okay, so let me go back to, and then again, I'm here for you. There's a little more than a dozen people that are here, so feel free, and more jumping on, so feel free to jump on with a question. All right, Mike, hey, good seeing you. We'll see you next time. Please do stay in touch. Is it a good idea to dispute old addresses on a file before you dispute the accounts? Abdul, I think you might have just missed this because, or maybe you didn't. I just talked about this a second ago, but maybe you missed it. So it doesn't matter. I'll just, for those who have been on here the whole time, I'm going to repeat myself a little bit. But there's, part of my job is dismissing a lot of the myths that have circulated in the credit repair space. And by the way, some of these myths I actually believed because the problem with credit repair is it's sort of like an echo chamber. Like credit repair people get advice and education and tips and know-how from other credit repair people. So if you have bad ideas, they tend to just circulate and become part of the fabric, become part of the conversation. So no, yeah, don't worry if you missed it, Abdul. It's perfectly fine. I'm happy to answer it again. So there's this belief that if you dispute your name variations or old addresses, that somehow that can disassociate you from accounts on your credit report and aid in the deletion process. By the way, Abdul, I believed this at one point. I was taught this at one point. I've told people this, okay? Not open book, no shame here. I used to tell people that back in 2012, 2013, when I was the guy on the phone enrolling people for the credit repair company that I worked for, because I learned it from credit repair people. Here's what changed it. The problem in this space is that most people in credit repair never talked to anybody who worked at a credit bureau or worked at FICO or worked at Vantage Score or have met an attorney who specializes in consumer protection, specifically the Fair Credit Reporting Act, specifically everything to do about credit and credit reports. Because they work from home, they bought a business opportunity or whatever. There's way too many people in this space who have no idea what they're doing. For a short period of time, I was one of those. Everything changed when I started going to seminars where people from the bureaus would come and teach. And that was one of the things that I was schooled on, was that It was actually John Alzheimer, formerly of Equifax, used to work in dispute resolution, also worked at FICO, said, listen, guys, the bureaus have 30,000 permutations, 30,000 ways to connect you to your debts. Okay, changing a name or an address will not aid in the removal of anything from your credit report. I remember when I heard that, I was sitting there going, oh boy, man, I'm just thinking through my head, how many times have I told people that one and I was wrong? So, but Abdul, but that's what happens is people in the credit repair space now can get onto YouTube and TikTok and whatever else, Instagram, and espouse this stuff that is factually inaccurate. And they don't know. They believe it. They're not trying to hurt anybody. They really do believe it, just like I believed it at one point. It's not until I had somebody who worked at a bureau who understands all the intimate details as to what goes on explain that what I believed was really kind of ridiculous. Not in a way that made me feel bad, but I did feel kind of bad that I told that to a lot of people over the years. So that's why I spent the last 8-9 years getting most of my education now from bureau people, from CDIA people, from FCRA attorneys. That way when I'm talking about facts rather than just bouncing back what a lot of people in the credit repair space believe and are espousing. Okay, great question, Abdul. All right, so let's get back to this letter I was talking about. And listen, post your questions. That's what I'm here for. I just want to show you, I want to wrap this up real quick. Let's see. So going back to this letter, okay? I realize you can't see my cursor, but essentially what this letter from TransUnion said is that, hey, we got your dispute letter. We don't think it was sent by you. And they don't say it in this letter, but the purpose of this letter is that they can legally ignore letters that come from credit repair companies or mail houses, by the way. It's one of the reasons why we don't allow you to send your or push your letters to a mail house for a small fee. Even though it'd be a nice profit center for us, we don't want to do that because if the dispute letter comes from a mail house, for sure you're probably going to get a letter like this because they know that you didn't send it. It's coming from somewhere else. So what do you do? All right, I'm glad you asked. Let me show you. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. And I am in Credit Versio. This is my staging area. The live Credit Versio looks just like this. Let me get rid of my logo and my name here, make it a little bit cleaner for you. Okay, so now I am in, it's round 2. When you get this kind of a letter from the bureau saying, hey, we don't think it was sent by you, that's almost always a round 1 response. Okay, fair enough. So what do you do? Here I am in my Credit Versio account, and I'm going to create my round 2. So everything is ready to go. I'm going to click Create Dispute Letter. Now, I'm on TransUnion, as you can see right here. Credit Versio doesn't know that you received that letter. How would it? Only you know you received that letter. But you can change your dispute reason. Let me show you. Or you can select your dispute reason. I'm going to make this really easy. I got 6 accounts to dispute, but I'm just going to do, for the moment, I'm just going to do this Macy's just to show you an example. All right, so I clicked Macy's. Let me open it up. Just want to show you something real quick. Just as a refresher, my first dispute, it'll give you the date right here. And then here's the suggested reason. The suggested reasons I previously disputed this. Now, this is an okay suggested reason if you get that letter saying they don't believe it was sent by you, but it's not the ideal response. I'm going to show you what the ideal response is. So let's just click 1 right now. I'm going to select next right here. Let's move forward. And now we're at the part where we're going to add a dispute reason. So I'm going to click that. Mobile looks a little bit different. You're going to be tapping your screen. And again, remember, this is the suggested dispute reason, but here's the reason I want to select. I want to select frivolous dispute response because when they tell you they don't think that you sent the letter, that falls under the category of a frivolous dispute, even though in that letter they don't use the word frivolous. They have other letters that do say frivolous, but it's still under the same umbrella that they don't think this is you, they don't think this is legit. So you're going to send them this. You're going to select frivolous dispute response. Let's go over this together. Hopefully you can read this. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Hope that helps you. Okay, it says, I previously disputed this account and I don't agree with your claim that it's frivolous. Okay, enter in, you didn't, this letter wasn't sent by you, frivolous, whatever it says, it's the same thing. Here's the important part. I personally created and mailed the letter, and I provided the reasons for my dispute in simple language. You had 30 days to investigate my dispute, and it wasn't done. Please delete any negative information in this account immediately. Then I'm going to click Save. Now, if I got that letter from TransUnion, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do that for every single one of these accounts because they didn't say which account they think I didn't send the letter for, because we're putting all of our disputes on one letter. Okay, now this goes through waves. So TransUnion will be totally quiet, completely compliant, happy to help you. They'll handle your disputes until, for whatever reason, we don't necessarily know, but they will send out waves of these response letters. And it doesn't matter what kind of letter you sent them. You could have, you could have downloaded a template letter from the CFPB, which is a regulatory agency over the bureaus, or the FTC. So that they're not really discriminating. They're just blasting this response out. See, I got the same letter from TransUnion when I applied through the third-party credit repair company. This is why I'm using Crediversio. Now I'm loving it. Great. Yeah, so Abdul, when I worked for my previous company, which was a very expensive, white glove, full-service credit repair company, really, very, very good, very, very high-end, great people. And we, just like pretty much every other credit repair company, we would send the letters out. We used all kinds of tricks and tips and things that we thought would fool the bureaus into thinking that the client sent it. Didn't work. Again, we believed it. We believed that stuff back then. But our clients, it was a very routine thing for them to get that letter, 100 times more than what anybody gets at Crediversio, because ultimately, what the bureaus understand is your postmark. Okay, so Abdul, let's say you live in Fort Lauderdale. I don't know where you live, but let's just make something up. So let's say you live in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and you hired a credit repair company. So you hired like a Lexington Law, not to pick on Lexington Law, but everybody knows Lexington Law. Well, they're based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. And even though they do have mailing addresses everywhere, but let's just say they happen to mail it out of Salt Lake City. Okay, they probably wouldn't, but let's just go along with my story. So what would happen is that would be received by the bureaus, and the bureaus are like, this letter was mailed from Salt Lake City, Utah, but Abdul, you live in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The jig is up. Okay, they know it wasn't done by you. And that's why you get those kind of responses. So with Crediversio, you print it, you mail it. Most people are writing that envelope by hand. So it's a wet stamp, that's what we call something that doesn't have an indicia. An indicia is like you get junk mail, you see that little pre-stamp thing up there that says postage paid. So you and I don't have indicias. I go over here, and in that rare occasion I got to mail something, I'll go grab a wet stamp. So that stuff matters. And it's just purely by accident that, not by accident, just by chance that you'll get that if you're working with Crediversio. Okay, Devin, let's see. Do the EOscar systems scan for fingerprints? My address was added to my friend's profile, and I leave no return address on purpose. No, nothing scans for fingerprint. Actually, EOscar doesn't do anything like that at all, Devin. EOscar is just, it's how do I describe it? It's like a direct connect from the bureaus to the data furnisher. So here's how it works. When the bureaus receive a dispute, it's processed and it's added into what's called EOscar. Okay, what's created is an ACDV. It's an automatic consumer dispute verification. That's what's created. EOscar is just like the telephone line that's connected to the credit bureaus and also the data furnishers. So when they receive the dispute in EOscar, it's literally just a file. Like they come in the morning and they log into EOscar, and it says you have 5 disputes to do today, and they have to click each one. And the software makes them do certain things, like they have to open up whatever attachments are there, and then they work the dispute. That's how it works. But EOscar doesn't do anything like magical, like scan for anything. It's just a software that data furnishers and bureaus use to talk to each other. That's all that it does. Nobody cares about your fingerprints. My address was added to a friend's profile, and I leave no return address on purpose. Yeah, Devin, did you ever live with that person, or did they ever fill out an application? So my address was added. Yeah, that's a pretty weird mistake. You'd almost have to live there, have a utility bill at that address, or maybe you live there when you worked somewhere. Somebody picked up your address from somewhere, and really the only way to do that is through maybe tax return, or I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say tax return. I meant to say your employer, or if you applied for credit somewhere. Addresses get picked up by manual data entry most of the time. Okay. Abdul, man, you are full of questions. I love it. I love keeping busy during our lives. And we're almost coming to the end of it too. We just got a few more minutes. My charge-off account is in its 7th year now. Do you think it still has an effect on my credit score? What are the chances of getting it deleted? Let me bring it back up again. Chance of getting it deleted in its 7th year, which is the last year before it gets deleted. Abdul, that's a great question. So personally, I would not worry about it, because derogatory credit, most of its negative impact on you takes place in the first 24 months, maybe 36 months. But if you've built good credit, if the last few years you don't have anything derogatory, you've been paying bills on time, then the charge-off is there cosmetically. It's limiting you a little bit, but it's not affecting you the way that it did the first 12 months that you had it. Collection charge-offs is about the worst thing you can have on a credit report. Even worse than a bankruptcy. You can recover from a bankruptcy much faster than you can recover from having collections and charge-offs. Bankruptcy wipes out debt, at least. So creditors know that you can't file bankruptcy again for another 10 years. So that actually does improve your credit rating, not to mention the fact that a lot of your debt gets wiped out. But if you have collections, especially open collections or charge-offs with a balance, those are a little bit more hardcore. But as with anything else on your credit report, 24, 36 months down the road, it's less of an impact. Now, here's my cautionary tale when you're disputing old accounts like a charge-off. And I've seen this happen. In fact, I was just having this conversation today with somebody that I was on the phone with. They had an old, I don't think it was you, Abdul. I would have remembered that. Excuse me. They had an old Harley Davidson account. And not a collection charge-off, but they had a bunch of late payments. But the late payments are almost 7 years old. And the account itself was from 2012. No, 2017. So it's an old account. A lot of history there. Really, really good account. We got a 5-year-old account right there. So the guy asked me, he's like, should I dispute this? And I said, I don't think you should, because the worst case scenario is, excuse me, I got allergies. We got stuff floating around in the air here in Las Vegas. What I told him is there is a small chance that if you dispute something that's really old, whether it be a charge-off collection or an account that's otherwise in good standing and paid but has late payments, if that creditor decides to delete that account, I've seen Harley Davidson do this. I've seen Harley Davidson delete accounts when somebody disputes the late payment history. That's bad news, actually. You don't want to lose your history. You don't want to lose, and this is where you have to make a decision. And this is why when we coach people or when we provide information, people call up on the phone, one of the things that we let them know is like, count the cost a little bit. If you've got old stuff, old charge-off, old account that's in good standing, but it's got some late payments, maybe those late payments are 5, 6, 7 years old, almost 7 years old, getting ready to drop off, you might not want to dispute it, because it's not really hurting you anymore. And and if things go bad, they might delete that account, and that would be bad. You lose that history. And the thing with history, That's 15% of your FICO score, most of your FICO scores, the ones that really matter. That's about 82.5 points that are sitting there. I'm not saying you would lose all 82 points. I'm just saying that your history is altogether is part of 15% of your score, and you have 82 points sitting there. But you could lose 10, 20, 30, 40 points if you lost an old account. So you want to think about that one. Okay, Black Girl 2. Hi, I'm fresh out of the BK7. Can't get approved for anything, but credit score 649. What can help? You know, one of the great things about filing bankruptcy, this is going to sound funny, in all the years that I did credit consulting, I did reviews of people's credit reports and gave them some great advice as to what to do. Bankruptcy files were kind of my favorite. They were my favorite to dispute because when you file bankruptcy, all of those accounts that were included in bankruptcy that were wiped out, when you dispute those, most of the time, Black Girl 2, is that they don't respond because when those accounts were included in bankruptcy, they entered into what's called a moratorium. They can't report any information when you're in that bankruptcy. That's why all your late payments stop. That's why all the activity stops. So when they're wiped out in bankruptcy, they really don't want to have anything to do with responding to disputes or handling any of that. So if you dispute the accounts, I'm assuming that you have accounts that were included in bankruptcy. You can dispute those in a good chunk of the time. Now, don't quote me on this. This isn't a guarantee. I'm just saying that from my experience doing this over a decade, when you dispute accounts that were included in bankruptcy, a lot of times those get deleted. So there's two things for you to do. Number one, do your repair. Let Credit Versio guide you through the process. Delete as much as you possibly can. Number two, you have eyes on you now, figuratively. What I mean by that is when you file bankruptcy, everything that you do on your credit report is more sensitive. So if you're overutilizing your credit cards, that's a red flag. It's going to hurt you more than anybody else because they're like, uh-oh, what is she doing? Is she getting ready to go into default again? So you got to really be on your best behavior. The best thing you can do is rebuild credit smartly. We got some great credit coaching videos in the credit coaching section in Credit Versio. It's in the tutorial section. You know, we have this here. But just learn the basics of what to do and what not to do with credit. Really, the best thing that's going to happen is for you to do is to rebuild, dispute, and put as much distance between you and that bankruptcy as possible as far as time. You can't rush that, but time is just going to move on. Next thing you know, it'll be 6 months, 12 months. I've seen people with bankruptcies on their credit reports that are 2-3 years old with credit scores in the high 700s. And the way they did that is they rebuilt smartly. They got a couple of credit cards. They pay everything on time. They pay their credit cards off. They don't carry balances. So they're just smart this time around. Everybody wants to give everybody a second chance. That's what's awesome about bankruptcy. Doesn't matter what happened. Everybody has a different story how they got into that position. The important thing is that you come out understanding what not to do next time around. And I'll tell you what, people who go through a bad credit scenario, like myself, like you, we really, really pay better attention to what we're doing in the future. And that is a great opportunity to start from scratch. Great question. Okay. Let's see. Can Navient to update the payment? Kim, I don't know what you're asking. Clarify that question for me, please, if you would. Signed up for Credit Versio 2 days ago. Awesome. So a couple of things for you. Make sure you watch your quick start videos. Get your letters out as fast as you can. Follow the instructions, and then just be patient. That's the big one. Abdul, do not apologize for asking questions. That's what we're all here. These are awesome questions, too. Should we have any strategy in mind if the charge-off account is only on Equifax and Experian but not on TransUnion? Can we say that TransUnion doesn't have it? How are you guys reporting it? Wonderful question. The 3 credit bureaus are 3 separate entities. One of them is actually publicly traded. That's Experian. They don't talk to each other. In fact, they don't even have they don't entirely have the same dispute resolution process. So it's really common for, if you were to dispute something, in fact, I had this conversation today. I used to have it all the time. Guy called me and was like, hey, I disputed this charge-off account, but it's still on my credit report. I'm like, well, I said, it probably came off of maybe one or two of your bureaus and it's on another one. He goes, oh, he goes, yeah, you're right. It came off of TransUnion. It came off of Equifax, but it's still on Experian. How come they do that? Well, that's because they don't talk to each other. And Experian has some different investigative protocols than Experian and TransUnion do. So that's why you're going to see some of those differences. And even in Crediversio, we have that language like, hey, this was deleted from this bureau and this bureau, because Crediversio can tell which bureaus it was deleted from. And they will add that to the dispute reason. Sometimes it'll help, but ultimately at the end of the day, each credit bureau is going to make their own decision on whether or not they're going to delete something or not. Even sometimes if the data furnisher tells the bureau, like, we want this to be updated and deleted, sometimes the credit bureaus will look at it and go, it's accurate. It looks like it's accurate. So, all right. Okay, hope that answers your question. If not, I'm happy to elaborate. Vicky, good to see you. Welcome. You are very welcome. If you have any questions, feel free to drop us an email, give us a call. All of our information's on the website. Does Navient forgive late payments? If so, how? You know what? I am not an expert on student loans, Kim. Sorry to not be able to help you on that. I don't know if they do or not. That's a conversation you're going to have with Navient. As far as how the dispute process works and how scores and credit reports work, I'm your guy, but student loans, I'm afraid that's a little out of my wheelhouse. Okay, Abdul, if you have a couple of charge-off accounts that are more than 6 years old, but your credit score is 750, do banks approve you for credit cards? They can. So there's a couple of aspects, Abdul, that come down to getting approved. Really two things. There's the score is one, and then there's the underwriting criteria. So, for example, I'll give you a perfect example. You can have a 780 score. This is a real life example. I've heard this many times. You can have a 780 credit score, but if you have a bankruptcy that's 9 years and 11 months old, it's getting ready to drop off next month. But if you have that bankruptcy in your public records section, American Express will decline you because they don't care. They don't want to see a bankruptcy. They don't care how old it is. They don't want to know what your story is. That is an automatic decline for I think all their cards. They're higher end cards for sure. They may have one like entry level card that might not do that. Also, too, like I don't think I can get an Amex card. So remember, I told you I went through the credit repair process years ago. Well, I had an Amex Platinum card that went into default back during the Great Recession. I was one of those guys that wiped out. So, and it eventually, that's one that did get deleted. American Express deleted it from my credit report, and then Midland Funding, who actually bought that debt, that got deleted too. So earlier, if you were on, I was talking about how 40% of my negative items were deleted during the repair process. That was some of it, and it had a balance too. And I always felt bad about that. Like I never swung back around and paid it because it just kind of aged. It fell off, and then time went by. But if I were to call or if I were to apply for an American Express, you better bet they remember me. And they remember that I still owe them that balance. So would they approve me? Probably not, but I've never taken that chance. I'll tell you what, I would love to have American Express Delta card because, I mean, I love that card and I fly Delta, but I think they would kick me to the curb. Okay. Yeah, but to answer your question, it depends on the underwriting guidelines, Abdul. Will they approve you or not? It depends. It really depends. And I wish I could tell you, yeah, call them up and tell them what's on your credit report, but you're not going to get a hold of anybody who's going to know the answer most likely. You're going to get a hold of that like $15 an hour. This isn't disparaging anybody. I'm just saying that you're going to get a hold of that I don't know, phone person that's just going to say, well, just apply and you'll find out. It's not going to help you at all. Okay, Kim, how can I get my credit score up and get approved for a house or an apartment? Well, there's a lot of moving parts to that question, Kim. I don't know what your scores are, what your credit report looks like. You know who's the best person to ask that question is a mortgage broker. So depending on where you are right now, like I just bought a house, granted, kind of stupidly when prices were almost as high as they were out here in Las Vegas. But hey, listen, I'm going to stay here for 10, 20 years, so whatever. I had to buy a place, but anyway, I knew my credit was fine, but I had a bunch of questions about rates and programs and everything, and you got to go to a mortgage broker. So if you want to buy a home and you have a goal in mind, what I would do is go talk to a mortgage broker and say, hey, I want to buy a home in 6 months, a year, whatever your plan is. Print up a credit report. You can print yours from Crediversio. Okay, it's going to show a Vantage score, but that doesn't really matter. If you want to show that mortgage broker your credit report, or have them do a soft pull, because some of them can do that, and just have them tell you. I mean, mortgage brokers are tend to be really, really good at knowing what to do and what not to do. And if they don't know, who's usually in the office or just a phone call away is that underwriter. So that mortgage underwriter, which is going to see everything, and typically you don't talk to the underwriter. The mortgage broker talks to the underwriter. And that underwriter can look at your credit report and go, okay, Kim, you got to do this and this and this and this and this. Or maybe it's just you got to do one thing. But without knowing anything or seeing anything, I would just be shooting in the dark, and I wouldn't be giving you a very sensible answer. All right, where are we? We are at 1 hour. We've been here for 1 hour. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Kim, great question. Thank you. Abdul, you were like the marathon question guy today. I love it. It's the fastest 58 minutes that I've had all week long. Last question. Okay. So if you want to drop off, we've done our hour. You're more than welcome to. I'm going to hang out for maybe a minute or so and ask some more questions. Can you explain what a Vantage score is and its purpose for credit? Yeah, I can. I happen to be an expert when it comes to Vantage scores, and also FICO. So in 2006, well, let's go back a little bit. I won't give you the whole long story. I just want to give you a little bit of framework. So a long time ago, back in the early 2000s, the three credit bureaus consulted this company and said, listen, we are paying FICO an astronomical amount of money to deliver FICO scores. FICO scores come from our information. So the FICO score gets is like an application that sits on top of the credit report data. That's how you get scores. So what happened was they said, well, why don't we just create our own scores instead of paying FICO these astronomical fee to give credit scores to people. So this company said, listen, if you created your own score, you could probably capture most of the market. So eventually, in 2006, the three bureaus banded together and they created Vantage Score. And Vantage Score is a spectacular score. In some ways, it's actually better than FICO. And if you haven't heard, in about 18 months, maybe a little bit less, FHFA mandated that the new scoring models to be used for all mortgage is going to be FICO 10T and also Vantage 4.0. So Vantage Score, which has, by the way, been growing astronomically, especially over the last 5 years, is a key player. So what you might know, Black Girl, too, is that when you apply for a credit card, when you apply for any kind of loan, chances are that that lender is looking at your FICO score and your Vantage score as well. So what's the difference? They just do they do essentially the same thing. They just use slightly different measures to get there. The best example I can give you is the difference between Fahrenheit and Celsius. So if I go outside, we're in Vegas. If I walk outside in middle of June, let's say it's 90 degrees outside, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, that's about what, 31 degrees Celsius. So if somebody says, well, hold on a second, 90 degrees is hotter because it's a bigger number. No, it's not. It's just, it's saying the same thing. It's just using two different numbers to say the same thing about you. So for example, let's say you have a 700 FICO 8 score and you have a 722 Vantage 3.0 score. It doesn't mean that your Vantage score is a better score. It means the exact same thing, that you represent the same level of risk. It's just presented differently. I hope that makes sense. Think of it like Celsius and Fahrenheit, and you'll understand the difference between FICO and Vantage score very easily. They both come to the same conclusion about you. They just numerically represent that a little bit different. And trust me, Vantage score is a big, big player in the space. I think they did something like 3 billion credit scores last year. And this is not 3 billion free Vantage scores that you get from like Credit Karma or other places. These are scores that were used in lending decisions to determine whether or not somebody's going to get approved. So I'm not sure if that thoroughly answers your question, but I know that for many years there, people would call the Vantage score the FICO score. That is, nothing can be further from the truth. That is a legit score, and now it's going to be used in mortgage, which has traditionally, for the last 20 plus years, been using a old form of FICO, a FICO 245 beacon score, old stuff. Okay. All right, Abdul, you are very welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. Tons of questions. We'll wait for next week. All right, very good. You know what? You can also drop an email, support@creditversio.com. All right, very good. I'm glad it makes sense. And by the way, go through the coaching videos in the tutorial section of your account. A lot of good credit 101 stuff, like all the stuff that you and I should have been taught when we were in high school. Like, this is how credit works. This is why it's important. This is how it's going to dictate a lot of the options you have in life. I wish I would have had that conversation. I wouldn't have messed up my credits so much like I did. I did it twice. When I was a kid, 19, 20. Then it took me years to recover. And then the Great Recession took me years to recover. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes that's just the way it goes. Okay, thank you so much for being here. Still got over a dozen people. I will be back next week, next time with John Olsheimer, formerly of FICO and Equifax. And we're going to talk more about credit growth and how scores work. And again, just general knowledge on credit. And I will look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much for